Welcome back, guys. So my Jeep is done. I haven't done a video on the Jeep being done yet, but I did want to do a few videos of kind of what got me to this point and why it took so long, weeks at a time, just to simply make some suspension and put some axles underneath it and gear some axles. Although I was working by myself, that shouldn't have been a month-and-a-half job. But I kept running into problems, and this Jeep has some rust on it. It is from up north. And I kept running into some problems, and one of the problems that we'll talk about today is my bump stops rusted out. So as you can see here, this is the passenger side bump stop. There's a metal tower right here, and then there's the bump stop cap that actually holds the bump stop in it that screws into the bottom of that tower, and there's a bolt that goes up through it that holds that cap on. If you've never pulled apart a Jeep suspension, then you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but anyone who's done a lift has ran into this. There's a nut welded inside this, what would that be, a tower or whatever you want to call it, and that's welded on this whole piece. That's welded onto the frame. There is a hole up here to where if you had to get a hold of that nut, you could, but that nut is welded on there. So there's no guarantee. Now this Jeep had a lot of rust on it, so this was completely corroded. When I went to take this off, I couldn't get any type of socket on the actual bolt. That's how bad it was corroded and rusted. So I was able to spin this cap to unscrew it, and that's how I got the other side loose. But on this side, it just didn't work. On this side, when I spun this cap, it actually twisted this whole piece of metal and twisted it in two, and you'll see what I'm talking about in this video. So in this video, I'm gonna go over how I fixed that, because it was a couple day long process of trying to figure it out. So I wound up fixing it with some 120 wall 2-inch DOM and one of these. And it's weird where you find pieces you can use, but you'll see where I make a piece in the video here in a minute, where I make a piece that goes on the bottom that has a nut welded onto it to where you can screw the old cap back on. And this is what I used. This is the top washer on a shock bushing, and it worked perfectly. I put a nut right there, I welded the nut on, and then this shape was perfect for me to put on that DOM and weld around it. So it's always good to keep old parts around. You don't want to be a pack rat, but sometimes you need old parts. So let's take a look at some of the clips I took. I didn't take step by step, but I did take some good video. So let's look at some of the clips, and maybe it'll help someone out that has the same problem, especially you guys in the Rust Belt. So I got good news and bad news. And who am I kidding? All I've got is really bad news. That happened when I was taking the puck off of this side that holds the bump stop. That was so corroded and rusted through that it just started twisting. And so I just twisted it on off. That's, I mean, you can see how corroded that is. Even the bolt head is jacked up. There's not a lot I can do here. That's welded onto this whole piece. I'm not taking that whole piece off. So I'm gonna cut this right here, cut it all the way through, and have a nice, because this isn't rusted, have a nice clean cut right there. And now I'm gonna have to weld a new tube up on there the same length with a threaded bottom for the bump stop, and then just get a new bump stop cup. I may have one of these bump stop cups. I've got a bunch of old Jeep parts, so we'll see. Great! You can see that I cut off the corrosion and the rusty piece, and I'm gonna have to weld a new piece on. Now I've got this piece. This is a 2-inch piece of DOM. You can see it's pretty thick walled. This is probably not what I'm going to use. I would like to use the same 2-inch DOM with a thinner wall. I'm going to go ahead and cut this flatter up here, and then I'll weld that right on like this. I'll just seam weld it, weld a bottom piece on that has a nut on the backside and a hole drilled in the middle so that it will accept a bump stop cap, and then hopefully that will solve that. That is a lot more work than I had anticipated. It's gonna be awesome. All right, so the cap is ready. That's just a nut to hold all this on so I could weld it. You can see I booger welded that bad boy onto this cap, and still have good threads. So we are going to, and I assume we'll be there forever. This isn't torqued down to a massive amount, so those welds should hold. Two different types of metal, kind of tough to weld to a lot of times, but with a MIG, But for the purposes I'm going to use this for, this is going to be just fine. Now I'll weld the cap onto the piece of DOM, and then that DOM will be ready to weld onto, after I grind all the welds down, we'll be ready to weld onto the Jeep. Alright, so here's my new shock tower. You can see how I've got this welded up. I've still got to polish these ends, these corners, get them nice and rounded. And then of course, after I get it welded up to the Jeep, I'll spray paint everything black. I've got a nut welded in there for threads so that this will go on it. And of course, it looks just like a tower. Like I said, I've still got to round these edges off, but there it is. So if you ever rust out your bump stop tower and don't want to spend the $200 on air bumps to put in it, which is probably the right way to do it, but you can always do it this way. Still got to weld it on the Jeep. Let me do that, and then we'll take a look and see what it looks like. Guys, it's getting late in the day, and I don't have a good flashlight out here, but hopefully you can see that is now welded in. It is threaded at the bottom. I don't have the cup painted yet, so I'm not putting the cup on. I will go ahead and spray this with some primer after I sand down a little bit of the rest of the shock tower, and that's ready to go. You can see how I grinded down the welds up there. You can still see a little bit remnants of them. There is about a 1 inch to 1.5 inch space on the very back where I knew I wasn't going to be able to grind the weld, where I didn't weld it. But again, this is 120 wall, which is twice as thick as what was on there. And with 3/4 of the weld done, it's going to be much stronger than anything that was already there. We're back in the light of day, and you can actually see what I did here. You can see that this is pretty seamless now. That piece I made versus what was on there. I've put the isolator back on there. I've painted this, put some primer underneath it, try to inhibit some of the rust. And I'm ready to put the cap and the new bump stop on, which will be about like that. Seems very long to me, but we'll give them a shot. If I have to come back and trim this, I can. If you run into an issue where your bump stops are rusting out, you can always drill this hole out and put an air bump there. If you want to spend $250, $300 and fabricate, or get you some DOM, find you a top cap, a top washer to a shock, and just go ahead and make your own and get it welded up on there. Alright, so that's the video. That's all I took anyway. I took some other video, but it just didn't turn out well. Some of it was kind of dark, and it got to a point to where I was so busy on this Jeep trying to get it ready that I just didn't get good video. So some of these videos are going to kind of suck a little bit. They're going to be a little bit short and not quite go through the whole process, but you kind of get the idea. You cut away the old, you find some metal to replace the new, to replace as new, and then you just fabricate around it until you figure out how to get it on there. I have bottomed these bump stops out since I got the Jeep back together, and it worked well. Don't think about scrapping your Jeep if it's just a little bit of rust here and there, and I've about got all the rust out of this Jeep, thank God. But guys, there will be some more videos coming pretty quickly on getting the rear end done. And again, I was in such a time crunch that I did not get very much video. I just didn't. I got a whole lot of video, but none of it that I could put together and make any type of sense with. But there are a few other things I'll show. I am going to show kind of me finishing the rear end, just some time lapse of me putting the rear end, and then I have some video of me driving it with the new gears. It's just a different Jeep, completely different Jeep. So if you've ever thought about re-gearing, definitely take a look at it. If you've ever thought about going up a little bit higher and maybe putting some long arms on it or some better shocks, things like that, do it. If you can afford it, do it, because everything you can do to these Jeeps just makes them better. Now, don't hack something together. Sometimes I can be accused of hacking things together, but we try not to do that. So guys, I hope this video helps, especially like I said, you guys in the Rust Belt, and if it did, then please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button. I'm almost to 1,000 subscribers. It's getting really close. I just need a few more. And guys, I hope y'all have a great day.